It began like a calm evening on The Tonight Show, but within seconds, late-night television would be changed forever. Ed Ames, the rugged co-star of NBC's frontier drama Daniel Boone, stepped onto Johnny Carson's stage in April 1965 with a simple goal: to demonstrate tomahawk throwing. A wooden silhouette of a cowboy was set up, the crowd expectant. Johnny, the epitome of cool professionalism, watched with polite curiosity. Then, history happened. Ames hurled the tomahawk, expecting applause for precision. Instead, it struck with surgical accuracy in the most embarrassing possible spot, the crotch of the wooden figure. The studio detonated in laughter, but the real explosion was Johnny himself. America's unflappable king of late night doubled over, gasping for air, tears streaking his face. For nearly 3 full minutes, an eternity on live TV, the mask of composure dissolved and viewers saw the real man behind the host, helpless with laughter, vulnerable, human. When he finally recovered enough to speak, he delivered one of the most perfectly timed quips in television history, but, that's indefinite. That unscripted moment became a cultural touchstone, replayed for decades. It wasn't just a funny accident, it was proof that live television could still shock, delight and connect millions of people at once. In an age before viral clips, Johnny's meltdown became the original viral moment, a reminder that authenticity can break through even the most carefully polished image. It began with a tiny accident and ended as one of the wildest cross-studio raids in television history. Johnny Carson's desk was his command center, every item deliberate, every prop in its place. One of those props, a simple wooden cigarette box, was more than decor. It was a personal totem. When Don Rickles guest hosted The Tonight Show in October 1973 and accidentally broke that box, he knew he'd committed late-night heresy. The following night, Carson returned, displaying the broken box on air and vowing playful retribution. Nobody, not the audience, not the crew, not even Rickles, could have predicted what would happen next. Months later, during a taping of Rickles' sitcom CPO Sharkey on a nearby soundstage, Carson saw his moment. In an unprecedented move, he grabbed a camera crew during a commercial break and marched across NBC's lot like a general going to battle. He didn't announce himself. He stormed onto Rickles' set in front of a stunned studio audience, cigarette box in hand, accusing his friend in mock outrage. Rickles, caught mid-scene in full Navy uniform, sputtered apologies while trying to stay in character. The audience had no idea what was happening. It felt like live television had burst through the walls of a scripted sitcom. That raid revealed something rare, the playful brotherhood between two giants of comedy, unfiltered and unscheduled. In a medium built on scripts and time cues, Carson threw away the format and chose pure spontaneity, and it worked. The moment has been replayed for decades because it showed Johnny Carson not just as a polished host but as a man willing to follow his instincts, crash another show, and create one of the most electric unscripted events in late-night history. For 3 decades Johnny Carson had been the unshakable center of American late night, suave, sharp, always in control. But on the penultimate night of The Tonight Show in May 1992, the unflappable king of cool faced something even he couldn't control: the end of his reign. Robin Williams had already lit the stage on fire with his manic energy, but when Bette Midler walked out, the atmosphere shifted. Nobody knew a goodbye could hit like this. After a few light jokes and playful banter, Midler turned toward Carson with a glint of mischief, and then something softer. "I want to sing something special for you," she said. The band struck the first notes of One for My Baby, and One More for the Road, a song about last calls and final farewells. Midler didn't sing it to the audience, she sang it straight to Johnny, eyes locked, voice trembling with tenderness. The studio fell silent. Crew members who had spent years on autopilot felt chills. Millions at home leaned closer to their TVs. And there, on live broadcast, Johnny Carson, television's most controlled personality, began to cry. Not the polite misty eyes of a farewell special, but real tears from a man saying goodbye to 30 years of his life in front of an audience that had become his nightly family. When the last note faded, Carson reached across, kissed Midler's hand, and said the only thing he could: "I can't top that." It was a line of surrender, humility, and gratitude all at once. Viewers weren't just witnessing the end of a show, they were witnessing a cultural passing of an era. For a moment, the wall between performer and public collapsed, and America saw the human heart beating underneath the legend. For years Johnny Carson welcomed animal experts onto The Tonight Show, knowing full well that exotic creatures had a way of turning calm interviews into ticking time bombs. But in 1979, one small Capuchin monkey transformed a routine segment into one of the most replayed moments in late-night history, a perfect collision of chaos and comedy that showed why live television is irresistible. Animal handler Joanne Steele had brought along her diminutive primate to demonstrate its habits. Carson, immaculate as always, sat poised behind his desk, flashing that trademark Midwestern composure. But the monkey had its own plans. In a split second, with no warning, it launched off the handler's arm and scrambled onto Johnny's perfectly coiffed head. The audience screamed, then howled with laughter. Johnny didn't flinch, swat, or panic. He simply froze, eyes widening, a wry smile flickering at the edges of his mouth as tiny hands tugged at his famous hair. It was sacrilege and slapstick rolled into one, the king of late night becoming a jungle gym for a primate on national television. When the monkey finally returned to its handler, Carson looked straight into the camera, hair sticking up like a haystack, and deadpanned, "And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why I prefer cats." The studio erupted. Millions at home laughed not just at the monkey but at Johnny's composure, his ability to turn an unpredictable disaster into comedy gold. In that instant, Carson wasn't a distant celebrity, he was every viewer who's ever had a day go sideways and somehow found a way to laugh. That moment remains a masterclass in the art of live performance. Embrace the chaos, stay human, and let the audience in on the joke. It's why this clip still feels fresh decades later. By 1980, Steve Martin had already begun to reshape stand-up into something stranger, sharper, and far more unpredictable than anyone on TV had seen before. When he walked onto the Tonight Show stage that year carrying the aura of a magician, the audience expected card tricks and patter. What they got instead was a surrealist hijacking of live television that even Johnny Carson, a man who'd seen everything, couldn't see coming. Martin announced his great Flydini routine with mock solemnity and stepped aside as if about to unveil high art. Then, with deadpan focus, he began unzipping his fly and pulling out one improbable object after another, an egg, a salt shaker, a ringing telephone, even a tiny hand waving to the audience. Each pull turned the polite chuckles of the crowd into a rolling tidal wave of laughter. Carson, at first playing the straight man, tried to keep his composure. But as the routine escalated into pure absurdity, you could watch him crack in real time, the host becoming just another person doubled over, wiping away tears. This wasn't scripted laughter or professional politeness, this was Johnny Carson being genuinely caught off guard, a rare reversal where the most unflappable man in television lost his cool because someone else's creativity was too wild to resist. When the cameras finally cut, Johnny was still laughing. Later he told a producer, "That's the kind of thing that makes this job worth doing." In a world of carefully rehearsed appearances, Martin had detonated a new kind of comedy right in Carson's living room, and Carson had embraced it. The Flydini bit became a legend because it captured something larger than a gag, the joy of seeing two masters of timing, one host and one anti-comedian, collide and create a moment that could never be repeated. Most guests on The Tonight Show came armed with a few prepared anecdotes. They'd sit politely, follow Johnny Carson's lead, and glide through their 7-minute segment. Then came Robin Williams, a human thunderstorm in sneakers. When he appeared in the early 1980s, the studio's carefully calibrated late-night machinery didn't just squeak, it blew apart. From the moment Williams sat down, the energy changed. Before Johnny could even finish his first question, Robin was already in motion, launching a rapid-fire stream of impressions, leaping from the chair to act out a scene, transforming Carson's desk into an impromptu stage. The camera crew scrambled to keep up. The control room buzzed with panic. "Where's he going now? Should we cut to commercial?" someone whispered. Johnny, though, simply waved them off. Because Carson understood what was happening, real, uncontainable genius on live television. Rickles opened with a smirk. Look at him. He's the big star. Everybody thinks he's so wonderful. Then, with perfect timing, let me tell you something, this man is overrated. Gasps, nervous laughter, the sound of millions of viewers leaning in. Johnny Carson, normally a master of composure, was visibly tense. He'd seen Sinatra's temper. This could go nuclear at any second. But Rickles kept going, poking fun at Sinatra's mystique, his entourage, his power. And then came the line that flipped the tension into triumph. Grabbing Sinatra's knee, Rickles deadpanned, "Frank, believe me, I'm only kidding. You know I love you. Can I get a ride home?" For a heartbeat the studio held its breath. Then Sinatra burst out laughing, not polite laughter, but genuine, full-throated amusement. The audience roared with relief. Carson's shoulders relaxed. In that instant, a new kind of late-night magic was born, the untouchable legend willingly becoming the butt of the joke, and the fearless comic walking the tightrope without a net. The moment was more than comedy, it was cultural alchemy. It showed that on Carson's stage, even icons could be human, even giants could be teased. Decades later, the clip still plays as a masterclass in courage, timing, and the strange electricity that can spark when risk, respect, and humor collide under the bright lights of live TV. By 1977 Dolly Parton was already a phenomenon, a voice like crystal and a persona that mixed small-town warmth with star-power glitter. She also carried a public image built as much on her self-deprecating humor about her curves as on her music. When she walked onto The Tonight Show that year, she expected playful banter with Johnny Carson. What she got instead became one of the most quoted, argued about moments in the show's 30-year history. As they chatted, Carson leaned in with that trademark twinkle in his eye. Then he delivered a line that dropped like a thunderclap, "I'd give a year of my life to peek under that blouse." The studio reacted in a split second, gasps, laughter, the sound of 1,000 people not sure whether to clap or cringe. Dolly, ever the professional, laughed it off with a sparkle and a joke of her own, but the moment had already gone out live to millions. Inside the control room, producers held their breath. Even in the looser atmosphere of 1970s television, this was unusually direct for Carson, who usually cloaked his innuendo in gentlemanly charm. The comment generated more viewer mail than almost anything else in the show's run, some praising Carson's honesty, others condemning him for crossing a line. Dolly herself never expressed offense, she later said she took it as a compliment. But in hindsight, the clip feels like more than a cheeky remark. It marks a pivot point in broadcast culture, the shift from a world where stars could be objectified on air without consequence to one where public discourse demanded more respect. Carson, usually a master of the invisible boundary, had stepped over it. That live TV slip became a flashpoint, replayed endlessly as both a time capsule of 1970s late night and a harbinger of the changing rules to come. For decades Bob Hope had been the gold standard of American entertainment. Vaudeville, radio, movies, USO tours, he was comedy's Iron Man, and his appearances on The Tonight Show were once considered surefire highlights. But by the 1980s, the magic was fading. Hope was in his late 70s, still game but now arriving with stacks of cue cards and jokes about golf and politics that felt like echoes from another era. When Hope sat down opposite Johnny Carson during one of those later appearances, you could feel the tension between nostalgia and reality. For decades Jimmy Stewart had been the embodiment of Hollywood decency, the halting voice, the gentle humor, the soft-spoken gravitas. He was also one of Carson's most beloved guests. Their rapport was always warm, a calm counterpoint to the quick-fire jokes of other visitors. But in 1981, Stewart walked onto The Tonight Show carrying something more intimate than a story, a poem about his dog, Bo, who had recently died. Carson likely expected a light-hearted tribute, perhaps a charming anecdote. Instead, Stewart began reading Bo, a simple title for a deceptively powerful piece. His voice, already tremulous with age, wove memories of loyalty and loss, nights reaching for a furry friend who was no longer there. The studio, used to applause signs and canned laughter, fell utterly silent. Then the camera found Johnny. This was not the glib smile of a host waiting for his turn. His eyes glistened, his jaw tightened. The unshakable king of late night was visibly moved, struggling to find words. Johnny was actually tearing up, a director later said. This wasn't a TV emotion. This was Johnny Carson, the man. What made the moment electric wasn't just Stewart's poem but Carson's choice not to defuse it with a joke, not to cut to commercial, but to let the weight hang in the air. In a genre built on punchlines and product plugs, the host had given his audience permission to feel something deeper. Millions at home felt it too. The segment became one of the show's most replayed not for laughs or celebrity gossip but for its human truth. It was a reminder that late night could be more than chatter. It could be a hearth, a place where two icons sat quietly and mourned a dog, and in doing so, mourned time, loss, and the inevitability of goodbye. By the late 1970s, The Tonight Show's animal segments had become appointment viewing. Exotic creatures plus Johnny Carson's wry patience were a formula for unpredictable fun. But on one particular evening, when zoo representative Joan Embry brought out a massive Burmese python, that unpredictable turned into genuine fight-or-flight television. The snake was supposed to rest placidly on the desk while Embry explained its habits. Carson sat at a careful distance, smiling, his tie perfectly straight, playing the part of the composed host. But the python had other plans. It began to move, first a slow coil, then a slither off the desk straight toward Carson's lap. In an instant, the king of late night wasn't a host, he was a man staring at several feet of muscle and instinct crawling toward him. Johnny bolted from his chair with a speed that stunned even his staff. The audience held with laughter. This wasn't a bit, a prank, or a rehearsed gag. It was pure instinct on live television, captured in high definition by millions of eyes at home. Once the python was wrangled back into safety, Carson returned, smoothed his jacket, straightened his tie, and delivered the perfect punchline, "Somebody better check my pants." The laughter doubled. What made the moment immortal wasn't just the snake's escape but the way Carson handled it. He allowed himself to be vulnerable, to react exactly as any of us would. For a few seconds, the distance between celebrity and viewer disappeared. He was no longer the cool professional, he was a guy who really didn't want a giant reptile near his leg. That authenticity, followed by a razor-sharp joke, showcased Carson at his best. The clip became one of the most requested in the show's history, a timeless example of why unscripted television can still feel like lightning in a bottle.